If you spend 30 minutes a day for 30 straight days, that's 900 minutes of accumulated effort over a 30-day period. If you were focused for 900 minutes on anything, I defy you to not make extraordinary progress. My life was on a track where I could blink, wake up in 50 years, and wonder what the fuck just happened. And that was the most terrifying thing to me. That was the thing that drove me to jump out of the plane and hope that the parachute was packed tight.
I think it'll be helpful to someone that's listening, because I understand building the evidence, but then there's actually the point where you kind of have to jump off the ledge. Can you talk about that moment you actually stepped off the ledge?
The ultimate unlock for living the life that you want to is that.
Today's guest is Sahil Bloom. Sahil is a 33-year-old millionaire. He runs a portfolio of different businesses that total over $10 million in value. He has a large social following, over 2 million followers across Twitter, Instagram, and his newsletter. He's happily married with a young son. And what I've just laid out seems like the perfect picture of a life, a complete life. And speaking with Sahil, that is the case. But it wasn't always that way. In his 20s, Sahil was earning good money, a 6-figure income working in private equity. By every measure and metric, he was successful. But there was something that just wasn't right. He wasn't happy. And so at the age of 30, he made a drastic change. In this episode, Sahil and I went through 12 harsh truths that will lead you to a life of wealth, success, and purpose. These are the lessons that Sahil wishes he knew when he was in his 20s. And let me tell you this. There are certain moments in this episode where even for me, sitting across on this couch with Sahil, I had to pause and just take in what he was saying. This episode is one of those. So I'm not going to say anything more. We're just going to get into it. Welcome to the Callum Johnson Show. Enjoy. There's no such thing as a loser that wakes up at 5 a.m. and works out. Talk to me about that.
This is like a marshmallow test for adults. You familiar with the marshmallow test?
No.
So 1970, I believe it was, Stanford researchers conducted this experiment with a bunch of children. They put them in a room and they put a marshmallow on a plate. And they told them, we're going to go away and we're going to come back in 10 minutes. And if you wait, we'll give you an even better treat. If you wait to eat this marshmallow, we'll give you an even better treat when we come back. And so they went away. And some of the kids, obviously, there's a little kid with a marshmallow in front of them. A bunch of the kids couldn't wait. And they sat there and they ate the marshmallow. Some of the kids waited, delayed gratification, to get the better treat that they were promised when people came back. And what the researchers did was they then tracked these kids over the span of their life. And what they found was that the children who delayed gratification, the children who waited to get the better prize later, ended up having better outcomes across education, across, their like income levels, SAT scores, all of these different things, health, BMI, like all of these things in life that are very positive. The kids who delayed gratification on this little test when they were children were then much better off down the line. And the lesson of it is that skill or that value of the willingness to delay gratification, to do the hard thing now, to get the better thing later, is a meta skill for life that applies to everything. So why I call the wake up at 5 a.m., you're not a loser thing, a marshmallow test for adults, is because it's the exact same principle. It's the willingness to do something hard now to experience benefits later. And you're enduring that on a daily basis. If you can wake up early and work out, you're doing something hard to start every single day that frankly no one really wants to do. No one like gets up at 4 or 5 a.m. and says like, oh, hell yeah, this is great. I love getting out of bed freaking when it's dark out and no one else is up. Like it's really hard. You don't want to do that. But the willingness to do that has ripple effects into every other area of life. So when I say that, people lose their minds, first off, because people extrapolate the logic incorrectly and say, are you saying that you are a loser if you don't wake up at 5 a.m.? Which is stupid. That's just incorrect. You're reversing the logic, which makes no sense. I'm not saying that at all. There's plenty of people who are night owls and who do fine. What I am saying is that I don't know anyone who wakes up at 5 a.m. and works out, who does hard things willingly to start the day, that is losing in other areas of life because they're displaying discipline, delayed gratification, a willingness to endure hard things that has ripple effects into anything else they're doing. They're a disciplined individual that carries over into how they carry themselves as a human being. And so I just think that it is a really, really powerful way to also just create a positive momentum cycle in your life. The first piece of advice that I give to any young person who is not happy with their standing in life, and they come to me for advice and ask, what should I do? First thing I say is wake up early and work out, because you immediately start self-identifying as a winner if you do that. It's hard. You're doing something really, really hard. And if you can do that 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row, 4 days in a row, you start changing your psychology about who you are. You start identifying as a winner. And when you identify as a winner, you start doing more winner things in every other area that exists.
You know what? I think that last point that you mentioned is such an interesting one, because it's like a lot of the times I feel like we get into this cycle of overthinking. We think that we can just think things in our mind and then the actions will follow. And a lot of the times I feel like it's actually the reverse. It's you do the actions first. You do the actions that a winner would do, and then that evolves the mindset. And so I'm curious, I want to also get into your personal story of like, I know that you're someone that wakes up early and does difficult things. And so are there any examples in your life where you've just seen the value of that just pay off tenfold?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been the difference maker in my own life has been that. Like that. I mean, what I realized it's probably in college when I first realized it, which was the first time that I had experienced real failure. I'd been like a smart kid in high school, or reasonably smart. I didn't have to try very hard. I'd gotten a baseball scholarship. I got to Stanford, and I vividly remember this. I don't know if I've ever told this story, but like I came into school thinking I was a hot shit, right? Like I had just gotten a scholarship to go pitch at Stanford. I thought I was the man. I got to campus the first day. All the baseball players were together. We're going to the locker room for the first time. And that's a big deal if you've never, played sports at a high level. It's basically like the first time you have your own locker. Like, in high school, you maybe have a locker you use or different things, but like the locker room at a D1 program, getting your locker with your name on it, where all your stuff's going to be, that's like a big deal. You're like ready to post that on social media, be like, yo, I'm out here, flex on it, whatever. So we get to the locker room freshman year, walk in with all my fellow teammates, and I'm looking around for where my number is going to be, what I'm going to be. And every single person has their own locker, except for one, which is a shared locker. And I was the shared locker with some like walk on. And I remember feeling like I just got punched in the face. It sounds like a stupid thing, but just from an identity standpoint, it was the first time in my life that I had experienced this feeling of like, oh, you're actually the lowest you can possibly be on this totem pole. Like every single person in this locker room has a solo locker except for you. You are literally like at the bottom 2 people on this entire organization of people here. And I remember just having this realization in that moment of like, oh, okay, there's 2 ways you can take this. You can be all down and upset and whiny and complain about it, or you can get to work. And my mode of getting to work was I'm going to show up with insane energy and attitude at every single practice, workout, whatever it is. And that meant morning practices, which we were going to have, where a lot of guys show up hungover, super tired. They stayed up late playing video games. They stayed up late doing all these other things. I was like, no, I can't afford to do that. If I want to make anything of this, I can't afford to do it. So I have to be up an hour before we're going to be at the field, like eating the breakfast that's good, waking up, drinking coffee, like so that I'm ready to go. I'm primed. By the time I show up at the field, I'm ready to roll. And so that was my first experience with it. And it was crazy because like my roommate, literally I would have mornings where I was getting up, like for 6 a.m. practice, I'd get up at 4 and I'd be getting up when he was going to bed. We would like high five. Like I'd be getting up and he'd be like, night, bro. And I'd be like, good morning. And we'd high five and walk out. And it was nuts then. And it's nuts now, right? Like people look at you different when you're the type of person that does those kind of things. And at the time, it's like, oh, you're lame. You don't go out. You don't party. Like people will call you crazy. People will call you lame. People will stop calling you to hang out when you're living differently, when you're doing things, when you're pursuing things differently. But if you have that fundamental vision for what you are trying to do or what you're trying to build, then that's what's required. That's part of the cost. That's a tax on all the benefit you're going to get from doing that thing, from living that way that you want to live.
Yeah. One of the things I think is so painful is when we have to experience almost like our identity starts clashing with reality.
Mm.
And I think for a lot of people that they're kind of like overachievers. I went to school with so many kids like this. Like they always did well in the exams. They always did well in the tests. They were meant to be the doctor, the lawyer, the engineer. They were top of the class. They got picked first in the sports games or the sports teams. And it's like that moment when you're around all of the other people that are excellent. And now you're just like in the middle. Or maybe you're not even in the middle. Maybe you're like at the bottom. And it's like your identity shift. It's like this identity shift. It's clashing with reality. And I think it's some people get lost in that.
Mm-hmm.
Like they can never recover. And so I'm curious for you, like at that moment in time, why did your mind instantly, instead of like, we see a lot of victim mentality, I feel like today. People are like, oh, this is unfair. Why did the coach do this? This is bullshit. I should have had this. Or they lied to me. They didn't tell me what I was meant to hear. Why for you was it just straight away, I'm just going to do more work? Okay, quick break. This episode is sponsored by our friends at Cloaked. Now, let me tell you, one of the most annoying, irritating things is when you get these spam calls on your phone. An unknown number pops up, you answer it thinking it may be something that's actually important, and it turns out it's just a spam call. Now, here's the truth. This is more than just an annoying thing. Spammers getting hold of your number can actually cost you thousands and thousands of dollars. And when I heard this, I was shocked. And my question was, how can I get scammed out of thousands of dollars if they just have my phone number? Well, the problem is that a lot of your personal information, like your mailing address, banking info, or even social security number, is linked to your phone number. And this makes you an easy target for scammers, spammers, and fraudsters. Luckily for us, the sponsor of today's episode, Cloaked, is an all-in-one privacy solution that keeps your privacy and personal information protected while you're online. And so here's what you're going to do next. Cloaked has a free phone number scan that allows you to check if your phone number is present on the dark web and with other data brokers online. So I'm going to link that in the description below, and you can scan to see if your phone number is on the dark web. And if you want to try Cloaked, use the promo code Callum at checkout to get 20% off a Cloaked subscription. That's the promo code Callum, C-A-L-U-M, at checkout to get 20% off a Cloaked subscription. Now back to the show.
I called my dad that day after having that experience and told him, and he said something to the effect of, remember who you are. And I didn't know what he meant. I like heard it. And I remember being like, what? I don't know what that means, Dad. And then I went home and I was thinking about it. And I remembered this one specific experience with my father. My dad's a professor. He chose a path that has probably some of the lowest time and financial leverage that you can possibly have, right? Like he worked extraordinarily hard on his research and work his entire career in life. He's very, very successful, but financially, middle class, right? Like you're a professor, you make your income from a university that pays you. But he loved his work and he took it so seriously. Every single opportunity that he had to show up, he was going to show up at his level of expectations, which was excellence. And that was the bar. It was excellent. And I remember going on this one trip with him. He had to speak at a conference, and we were on an overnight flight. I think it was in Asia when I was a kid, and we're on this overnight flight, and I'm sitting there with my dad, and I'm watching movies on the plane or whatever. And my dad literally for a 12-hour flight was just working on this presentation. And I asked him, he stayed up overnight. He was working on this thing the entire flight. And I asked him at the end of the flight, I was like 10. I asked him Dad, you didn't watch a single movie. You didn't eat the dinner. What are you doing? And he was like, well, this is what's required for me to perform at the level that I know that I'm capable of. This is the work that is required. And this is what I believe in, that I can achieve anything in the world. He always used to say this to me, you are capable of achieving anything in the world if you're willing to put in the work. Doesn't matter what it is, full stop. And so I remember in that moment feeling those lessons that I had experienced with my dad over the years of okay, this is the first time I actually need to put that lesson to work. Because I had been able to skate by up to that point. I didn't really have a ton of failure. I didn't really need to work that hard. That was the first moment where it was okay, got a little kicked in the nuts. Now you gotta either step up or just quit. Yeah, go be a student. And are you going to be that type of person that when it gets a little hard, you're just the person that steps down? So I think about that a lot now as a father myself, like that one tiny experience of seeing my dad doing that. It wasn't necessarily him saying all those things to me about work hard this, work hard that. It was that I saw him. I actually saw him embodying that principle. That was what was so powerful to me.
I remember seeing a quote when it's like, true confidence is when you realize that you are the person that you say you are. Like you actually act in alignment. And I think today, especially with like social media, it's so easy. We were talking about this before. It's so easy to portray something that you're not. And so when you prove it to yourself that I'm actually this person that does this, it just takes you to a whole nother level. I remember Kobe Bryant saying this, is he never wanted to, like, they asked him, they're like, why do you wake up at 4 a.m.? Why do you do these workouts? Why, like, when other players are at the club or partying, are you in the gym? And he was like, I never wanted to finish my basketball career and felt like I left anything on the table. And it's just that, it's like, I don't care about impressing others or like all this outside stuff. I'm trying to impress myself.
Yeah. By the way, my Kobe story, which I don't think I've ever talked about, this is probably 2017. So this is after he retired. Maybe it's 2019. I was down working at one of our companies that my fund had invested in Newport, Southern California. And I was an early morning wake up guy, as we know, and that was what I did. And so I wanted to work out when I was down at this company. I was there for a whole week. And so I got a day pass at the Equinox in Newport Beach. And I needed to get in there early because I had to be for meetings at 7 o'clock. And so I got to the Equinox at 4:45. It was going to like open right at 5. I wanted to be there. And so I got there at 4:45. And there's like 5 people. And we go in, start working out. And I'm like, there's this guy working out with a trainer. It's 5:05 in the morning. There's 5 people in there, 7 people in there total. I'm like, that guy looks so familiar. And then I just realized, I was like, holy shit, that's Kobe Bryant. Retired, done with his basketball career, working out right now at 5 in the morning, grinding, working really hard in the gym at 5 in the morning. And I'm like, I know that he's doing some investing. I know that he's doing other stuff, but like that bro can chill. He does not need to be waking up at 5 in the morning, but he's here right now at 5 in the morning. I walk out, I leave the gym at 6 o'clock or so. He comes out and he's walking to go to his car. And I just remember being like, man, I don't like being the guy that goes up to people and says, hey, Kobe, but it's Kobe Bryant. I was like, I'm never going to get to do this again. And so I just said as he was walking by, like, hey, Kobe, I'm a huge admirer of your career and just like, thank you so much. And he stopped, came over and talked for 5 minutes and like took a photo with me. And he did not need to do that, right? I mean, it's like, it was an incredible moment. We can put the photo in the show notes. Like, it's hilarious. I look like I just got out of bed. He's like, it's 5:45, 6 in the morning. But I just remember thinking like, wow, that is really amazing that his career's over. It's not like he's working for basketball. It's not like he's working for his contract anymore to keep his body healthy. He's done, but he's still showing up and doing these things because that's who he is. That's his identity. That's what he's about.
You know what? Here's where I want to go, because I think there's someone that's listening that they're in like a rut, right? And so like when I hear advice such as there's no such thing as a loser that wakes up at 5 a.m. and works out, I think about the person that's in a rut. Like they're just a bit comfortable. Everything's a bit too easy. They just, whenever they want to do something, they just do it. If it gets a bit too hard, it's like, I'm not feeling it. They just move on. And I think advice like this, it's so good at like pulling you out of that rut. It's like a shock to the system. It's like kind of David Goggins-esque, right? And one of the things that I was thinking about even as you were speaking, it's so easy to hear this sort of advice and you get like excited, you get amped up, you get motivated, you get inspired. And maybe the first day, 5 a.m., you're at the gym, you're there bright and early. Day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, day 8. starts getting a bit tougher to keep
Mhm.
doing it. And the thing that comes to my mind is like, people really struggle with the discipline.
Mhm.
And you're someone that's tremendously disciplined. So I'm curious your advice there. How does someone stay disciplined?
I've always thought of discipline as the ultimate act of service to your future self. If you're familiar with the idea of like love languages, acts of service is one of the 5 love languages. And when you take an action today that is painful, that is hard, that is difficult, you are performing an act of service to your future self. That can be really hard because you don't want to do it in the present. It's challenging to get out of bed. It's challenging to focus, do the focus work now. It's challenging to have the hard conversation now that you could just delay or could ignore. Whatever that thing is, it's really hard in the present. So it's about bringing the after into the before. What I mean by that is, you know how it feels after you do the thing. You know how good you feel after you woke up and got those 100 push-ups in, or after you woke up and went for that walk, or after you woke up, got in the cold plunge, or after you woke up and did that piece of work that you've been dreading. You know how that feels. You feel like a fucking badass. The problem is that you can't internalize that feeling before. So when your alarm goes off in bed, you just know the feeling of right then where you're like, hell no, I just want to press snooze. I'm just going to stay in bed. I can do the work later. All of the mental gymnastics are running in your head of why you can just stay in bed, or, oh, you went to sleep later, you can do it later. You woke up 4 days in a row, so you take a day off, you deserve it. That's what's going in your head. What you need to do is train yourself to pull that feeling of the after into that moment so that you can override all of that mental gymnastics, so that you can recognize, I remember, I can really feel it and imagine how good this will feel when I just get out of bed, when I just go turn off my alarm. I do certain things that just force me to override it. I put my alarm clock in the bathroom. So when my alarm goes off, I cannot press snooze. I have to get up out of bed, walk 10 steps to go turn it off. Once you've done that, you're probably not getting back into bed. So you can do little things like that that are little behavioral hacks that make it so that you're kind of making that startup cost a little bit easier, a little bit lower. But it's like the old adage, right? It's like jumping into the frozen lake or jumping into the cold lake. It's not being in the lake that's hard. It's not even jumping in that's hard. It's walking out the door of the warm house to get outside that's hard. That's how I feel. I do the cold plunge every morning. The hard part is not being in the water. The hard part is opening the door from my bedroom to get outside, because that's the moment where you really have to commit. Once you're outside, you're like, yeah, well, now I'm going to do it. I'm here. But the hard part is remembering how you're going to feel in 5 minutes when you're done with it in that moment before you've started.
You know what? I think any pursuit that's worthwhile, so like the cold plunge, I know I've had it with the podcast, just anything that you've done for a long amount of time that, especially in those initial stages, it was difficult. We've all had moments where we're like, why the fuck am I doing this? And it almost feels like it's like quite binary. It's like you either do it, you either keep doing it, or you just stop and that's it. And so I'm curious, and it can be anything that you reflect on that it was just difficult for you. What was kind of that almost, it was that split second decision moment of like, I'm either going to do it or I'm going to stop. And what kind of pushed it over the edge?
My big heuristic or razor, if you will, for anything that I take on is that I have to be willing to do it 100 times. And so I try not to take things on unless I'm committing in my mind to doing it 100 times. And that can be any new habit or any new thing. So like running, as an example, I was like, I don't really want to take this on as a pursuit unless I'm willing to do it 100 times, because 100 is sort of my proxy for the amount of time it's going to take for me to be good at this thing. Not great, maybe not elite, but good. And if I know that that is the cost of entry going in, I take it a little bit more seriously what I want to take on. Because by the way, one of the biggest issues is that people take on too many things. So they're like, hey, I'm struggling in life. I'm in a rut. Let me go I'm going to wake up early. I'm going to do this. I'm going to learn this language. I'm going to do this focus work plan. I'm going to do this thing in the evenings. I'm going to do this. You're like, oh, you just took on 10, 15 things. Just do one. Literally just do one thing that's moving you in the right direction. The most beautiful thing about life is that no matter where you are today, no matter how dark, no matter how down you are one good decision away from being in a slightly better place. No matter what. You could be in the worst place of your life. And if you make one positive decision today, you're going to end up tomorrow in a slightly better place than you are. And then you can make one good decision then and be in a slightly better place. And you slowly start turning the tide and walking towards where you want to end up. You don't need to make 100 decisions today. That's the point. The reason most people don't start is because they're thinking of it as, oh my God, look at that mountain in front of me. I have to climb all the way to the top of that. You don't have to climb all the way to the top of that. You have to climb one step. That's all you have to do today, the one tiny thing. Then you can worry about the next step. Then you can worry about the next step. But all it is the one decision. That's why I love, I talk about my 30 for 30 approach to anything in life. Just make it simple. I'm going to do 30 minutes per day for 30 straight days on whatever the thing is that I'm trying to improve at. If that's, hey, I'm out of shape, go walk for 30 minutes, 30 straight days. All I have to think about is just doing my 30 minutes today. And I'm going to have a friend that I'm accountable to that we're just going to say, hey, done at the end of that day. That's it. I'm not going to make 100 other changes in my life. I'm not going to worry about my diet being perfect this month. I'm not going to worry about my sleep being perfect. I'm not going to worry about lifting. I'm not going to listen to Huberman or Attia and have a million protocols. I'm just going to walk. The one little thing. If we can all find that, if we can sort of pull back from this feeling of needing to make the 100 changes at once, optimize the million things at once, and just focus on what is that one decision I can make today that'll leave me slightly better off, everything gets so much easier.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, let me read it out. So you say how to change your life in 30 days. I call it my 30 for 30 approach. 30 minutes per day, 30 days straight. It's that simple. In any arena in which you want to make progress, do the thing for 30 minutes per day for 30 straight days. Have a new business idea but frustrated by your lack of progress? Work on it for 30 minutes per day for 30 straight days. You know what's one of the interesting things? I feel like I have so many conversations of people that want to start a business or they want to be an entrepreneur. They're working that job that's not really for them and they can feel it. Maybe it's the manager, maybe it's the work that they're doing, it's the meetings they're in, it's the team. They're like, this isn't for me. And you get into the conversation with them, you're like, okay, like what's the business idea? Like, what are you going to do? The conversation ends there. And that's why I like this approach, because it's like, just get started. And
you don't need to know what it is you're getting started on. So people, like, you run into that person. I've been that person, by the way. I wanted to make a change, but I had no idea how. If you spend 30 minutes a day for 30 straight days, that's 900 minutes of accumulated effort over a 30-day period. If you were focused for 900 minutes on anything, I defy you to not make extraordinary progress. But the point is, you don't need to know the business idea. The 30 minutes could be spent researching things. It could be spent thinking about different ideas that you have. It could be spent documenting things that annoy you on a daily basis, which might end up being business ideas, things that you could improve upon in the world, that you could reduce friction around. But it doesn't need to be that I'm building my business, right? It could be ideation. It could be anything during that 30 minutes, but 900 minutes of focused effort is an incredible amount of time. And you can truly change a whole lot about your life in that 30-day window.
Yeah. Can you take me back to that moment in your life? Because I think we look at what you're doing now and you have the followers, you have successful businesses. It's hard to imagine there was a point where like you were at a job thinking about like, what's the next step? Or like, how am I going to fulfill my potential? And so can you take me back to that moment where you felt that uncertainty of like, you knew that you wanted to do something else, but you didn't yet know what that looked like?
Yeah. So I spent my first 7 years of my career in the world of private equity. So for those who don't know what private equity is, basically buying and selling businesses. You have a fund, you go and invest in a business, buy it, hopefully improve it, and then you sell it for more than you bought it for. The first 3 years of that 7, drinking from a fire hose, absolutely loved it. Intellectually challenging, incredible group of people. And after that, I started to have this slow nagging feeling that it wasn't for me. And that was driven by a few things. I mean, number one, I didn't, and I don't care enough about money to truly be great at something in the world of finance. Because at the end of the day, it's all about money. You're trying to make money. It's a financial industry. And I didn't care enough about it. And so when we talk about needing to be obsessed with your craft in order to be exceptional or top 1% at it, I was never going to be that. And I sort of knew that in the back of my mind. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll get into it. Maybe I'll fake it. But I saw people that were. I had colleagues, friends, some of my dearest friends at the firm. I saw what it took to be the founder, to be the partner, to be the guy. And I've always had this feeling like, I want to be the guy, right? I want to be him. No matter what it is, whatever I'm doing, I had a vision for myself that I'm going to be him. And it wasn't going to be in that track for me. The problem was, I don't have an entrepreneurial bone in my body, especially not at that time. My dad's a professor, tenured professor, right? Like the least risk-averse path you can follow in your life.
Yeah.
Taking the stable, safe job. I mean, my mom is Indian. Like taking the stable, safe job at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs or wherever. Like that's the definition of success that I had in my mind. You just stay and you work 30 years and you make a bunch of money and things are good. And you never had to take a risk. And so the idea of doing something on my own, it just wasn't even remotely on my mind. And frankly, it never was until it happened, until I was actually in it. What really happened was I was pulled by my energy into something that I just fell in love with, which was the writing. COVID hit. I was stuck at home. I had more time on my hands. I started doing a little bit of writing because I always enjoyed writing. And I just found this unbelievable energy for it, that it was pulling me. It was like, I want to sit down. I'm working 100 hours right now between my job and now this new thing that I'm doing, which I don't know what this thing is, but I was just pulled into it. So the 30 minutes per day was like 2-3 hours per day that I was spending on it, but it felt easy. It was the first time in my life that I was working on something, but it felt easy. It felt like this isn't even what, I mean, I could really just sit and do this. I'm learning so much. I'm growing. I'm understanding the world better. And that to me was the sort of turning point where like something felt easy for the first time that could be a professional pursuit. Fundamentally, that I call it the leap of faith, right? Like you're in the stable track, things are good. Good is the worst place you can be in a lot of ways, because when things are good, you don't have an incentive to step off. When you have a mortgage and you have a kid and you have a good job, 99% of people will not step away from that to go find the thing they're truly meant to do. It's much easier to stay when things are good. What that really is, the tension and the friction there in making that change is driven by, I think, two fundamental asymmetries. One is an information asymmetry. You know everything about where you are today in your path. You know nothing about what the other side looks like. And then two, an evidence asymmetry. I have all the evidence in the world that I can build a life where I am currently. I have no evidence that I can build a life on the other side. That manifests as this enormous amount of fear. There's this huge gap that forms between where you are today and the life that you want to live ultimately on the other side. And it's just a terrifying expanse of nothingness. The whole goal, if you are that person, if you want to take that leap of faith, is how do I close that gap? How do I shrink that fear by closing those two asymmetries? By gathering information so that I know more about what that other side looks like, and by creating evidence so that I know that I can live on that other side and build a great life there. 30 for 30 can help you do both of those. That 30 minutes can be spent gathering information, having conversations with people, researching, learning about what paths look like on the other side. That 30 minutes can be spent creating evidence, getting your first customers for a little beta project, going and actually creating a landing page that shows that you can pull in leads for something. You can use that 30 minutes to actually be shrinking that gap while you're still working in your day job and in the safe thing. And then ultimately, you can then make the decision with a clear head. You can say like, okay, I gathered a lot of information, so it's no longer such an asymmetric information profile. And I created a lot of evidence, so it's no longer an asymmetric evidence profile. Now I can stand here where I am and say, okay, does it make sense for me to make this leap? It's much easier to then make that decision rationally rather than emotionally.
Yeah. I love this conversation. I love the way that you just broke it down. And what we're really talking about is what we mentioned earlier, is the identity shift. And it's funny. I remember we had a conversation a few months ago with Dickie Bush, and he used to work in investment banking. Or he used to work in banking, and then he obviously left to do his writing thing as well. And he said, up until that point of my life, I was a professional box ticker. Like he was very academic growing up, gets the great grades, the perfect grades, goes to Princeton, then goes into banking. And it's like this perfect track. And that's kind of what school teaches you, is like you just get so good at like preparing for something, getting the great grade, and then doing it, and then keep moving on. It just gives you this nice, certain, stable path. And then you reach this point where it's like, it's not enough. It's exactly what you said. Things are good. And almost things being good is like the worst thing, because it's like, it's good and there's not really a logical reason of why I should leave, but you can feel the potential that you're leaving on the table. And I think there's so many people that are in that moment where their family, their friends, everyone around them has this expectation of who they are. Oh, Sahil, he's in private equity, earning a bunch of money, great partner, great living situation, great income. Like, why would he ever leave? And even when you have these conversations with people of like thinking about quitting, they look at you like you're crazy, right? And so I think it'll be helpful to someone that's listening, because I understand building the evidence, but then there's actually the point where you kind of have to jump off the ledge. Like you actually have to go for the thing. And that's a mindset switch. That's an identity switch. Can you talk about that moment you actually stepped off the ledge?
Benjamin Franklin said, most people die at 25 and aren't buried until they're 75. I remember reading that quote and feeling like it hit me like a ton of bricks. How many people do you know, and how many times have you felt in your own life that you were sort of just sleeping your way through life? I came to the realization that my life was on a track where I could blink, wake up in 50 years, and wonder what the fuck just happened. And that was the most terrifying thing to me. That was the thing that drove me to jump out of the plane and hope that the parachute was packed tight. Because that idea that my life could just fly by and that I would end up in a place that I had no intention of ending up was so scary and so much worse than the fear of taking the action and it not working out. The regret from inaction is always worse than the regret from action, fundamentally. Knowing that, understanding that, internalizing that gives you the power and gives you the wherewithal to make that leap and to make that change. The identity shift thing is hard. So much of your identity is tied up in the external, right? It's in the accolades, it's in the achievements, it's in the job, it's in the bonus, it's in the title, it's in the looks, the car, all of those things, especially when you're on one of those good tracks. So much of your identity is your job and who you are. And like, it sounds impressive to other people, to your family, to your partner, to your kids, to your colleagues, whatever. Recognizing that your true identity is internal, not external, is essential to living a healthy life. Your identity is you. And clinging to an old identity is the source of a whole lot of struggle in life. There's this story of the ship of Theseus. It's an ancient Greek hero, slays this evil minotaur on the island of Crete, and then comes home to Athens and leaves his ship there in the care of the Athenian people. And for 1,000 years, the Athenians maintained the ship. And every year they would reenact his voyage to pay homage to this great hero. And obviously, over this 1,000 years, the ship starts to fall apart little by little. And so every time they diligently would replace a single piece from the ship. So when something wore out, they would take it off and replace it with the exact same materials. And Plutarch, the Greek philosopher, later asks the question, once every single piece of this ship has been replaced over this 1,000 years, is it still the same ship? Because every single piece has been replaced. And I've thought about that so much as this interesting paradox. And what I've come to recognize and come to consider on my own is it doesn't really matter. There are infinite versions of you, infinite versions of who you could have been, who you are, who you may be in the future, the roads not taken, the roads you did travel. It doesn't matter because you are ever changing. That's the paradox of change. The only constant in life is change. It doesn't matter who you used to be. It doesn't matter. It fundamentally does not matter. You are changing in every single instant. Every 7 to 10 years, your body actually physically replaces every single cell in your body. You are literally a ship of Theseus. And so that should unlock you to realize that you are a being of change. You are actually meant to be constantly changing and to embrace that change and to embrace that you don't need to cling to that old identity. You don't need to cling to the old way you did things, the old mindsets. You don't need to cling to the old people who no longer serve you. You don't need to cling to other beliefs that you used to have, to the old way you used to do anything in your world. You are fundamentally a being of change and can continue to change and develop in any way that you can possibly imagine or any way that you want to in life. That, to me, is the ultimate unlock for living the life that you want to, is that simple recognition that it doesn't matter. Asking the question of, who am I constantly is actually it's an unnecessary pursuit.
You know, that's so good. And for the person that's actually going through that moment right now, where like they're just questioning it so much, I have to ask this, which is, if I take you back to that moment where you step off the ledge, you quit the private equity job where I'm sure you're earning good 6-figure income at a great workplace, and you quit it to be the content creation on Twitter. Was there a moment where you felt like an idiot? And here's what I mean, and here's why I say it like that. 18 months ago, I leave my job to do the podcast full time. My gut instinct was like, this is the right thing to do. I'm just going to follow through with it. Now, I also, at the same time, I moved back from living in Manhattan. I have an apartment in Manhattan. I moved back to my mum's place in New Jersey. There were many nights where I was like, the podcast wasn't really getting the traction that I wanted. And I'm like, why did I do that? Like, I was so impatient. Like, was I just an idiot? Was I foolish for doing that? And so I'm curious for you that in those early stages of making the decision, were there moments where you were like, was I an idiot for doing this?
I'm going to answer this in a couple ways. In the early days, yes. Yesterday, yes. I still have that. And I truly mean that. I'm not just saying that as a talking point or to make someone out there feel good about the fact that they're feeling that. I genuinely wrestle with that stress and anxiety regularly of like, oh man, this path doesn't have the clear track. It doesn't have the 20, 30-year longevity. It's me hunting and killing every single day. That's what it is as an entrepreneur, right? You're chewing glass every single day, building your own thing. You need to go out and hunt and kill a gazelle every single day. And if you don't kill one today, you're going to be a little hungry and you got to go kill one tomorrow. But you can either live life as that lion or as that shark, or you can live life as a sheep and just continue and be fed and the grass is good and you have a shepherd that's leading you around and that's your life. And it's kind of cliche for me to use the analogy of a shark or a lion, right? But that's real. That is what you are fundamentally. You have to go out and hunt. I constantly struggle with that. And what I've come to feel and how I've sort of wrestled with that in my own life is I've realized that you have stress when there is a gap between your present reality and your expectations, and you don't have a plan to close that gap. Once you have a plan, it just becomes about executing on a daily basis. And that's not particularly stressful because then you're living in the present. You're just like, I just have to show up. I just got to wake up and just execute. Here's what it is. Here's what it is. Here's what it is. When you don't have that plan and when you can't really see it, when you don't know what's working yet, that's when that stress and anxiety builds up. So whenever I feel that, whenever I start to feel like, oh crap, was this the right choice? Was this might not work, that might not work. I just zoom out and say, okay, it's the lack of a plan. How can I figure out that? How can I figure out the right direction, the right angle to infuse my energy into this that's going to drive me in the right way towards those expectations that I have? And I find when I do that, that centers me, because I think Jim Carrey said it, that stress and anxiety is fundamentally about time traveling. It's like you're not living in the present. You're thinking about the future, or you're thinking about the past. And when you do that, so many thoughts, right? There's so many things you could have done. You could have approached this differently, that differently. In the future, you're like, what if this doesn't work? What if that doesn't work? But when you're in the present, everything's just execution. You're just moving. There's action. You're just doing stuff on a daily basis. You're grateful. You're experiencing gratitude that, oh my God, I get to have a conversation like this today. I don't much care. If this doesn't work out in 10 years, whatever, if podcast fails, if my businesses fail, I got to have a cool conversation today. I'm going to think about that. This is a lot of fun. And that centers you in a way that is hard to describe in terms of the value that can create in your life.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've had the same thing, which is like, you go through these constant periods of anxiety where you're like, this could actually just all end like today, tomorrow. Like it could all be over.
Yeah.
And that's why I like the framework that you described with the how to change your life in 30 days. It forces you into the present. It's just about the 30 days, just about showing up, 30 minutes, 30 straight days. My next question to you though, say that I'm the person, I have that, like, I want to start a business. And so when I lay out my 30 days, it's like, okay, I'm going to make some progress on the business idea. I'm curious, what happens on day 31? Like after I've gone through that process of the 30 days, and let's say that after that period, I have the business idea, I have the clarity that I was looking for. I have the thing that it's pulling me in the same way that writing was for you or podcasting for me. What happens on day 31? How do I keep it going?
I just start up again. I just keep it rolling. I mean, I think of the 30 for 30 as like a monthly pursuit. Like you're taking on a monthly challenge of sorts. And what your focus is in any given month can change. So if you're in a stable career that you really enjoy, life is good, the first, January 1st, 30 for 30 could be, I want to get in better cardiovascular shape. So I'm going to run for 30 minutes or I'm going to bike for 30 minutes. And then the next month, it may be that you want to learn Spanish. So you're doing something. If you're someone that's trying to find and identify and build your business pursuit, it's progressing, right? It's like video games. So the first level is identifying the opportunity. That's this month. I'm going to try to identify an opportunity. 30 minutes, 30 days. I get there. I identified it. I feel like I have it sketched out. Well, what's the next layer of turning this into something real? Maybe it's starting to get something set up around this. So maybe that 30 minutes today is spent getting the LLC set up and formation documents. Maybe the next day is spent starting to toy around with a website, getting a domain name. Like you start to actually force yourself that every single day I'm going to make a little bit of progress. 30 minutes is not enough that it's taking up your whole day. It's a little bit of progress, but you know that it's progress and that the ball was moved slightly forward. And if it's a side hustle, even better, right? You have your normal job. You don't have much more than 30 minutes of focus a day, but you know that you're moving that hustle a little bit forward every day. So I just think of it as a rolling pursuit. You can just roll into the next one, whatever the next thing is. It's not like 75 hard where, you do your 75 days and then you're like, you may totally fall off the bandwagon because you burned yourself out. 30 minutes a day for 30 days should not burn you out. If that burned you out, you got bigger problems that you need to address. Yeah. If 30 minutes a day burned you out. So I would just think of it as a rolling pursuit. And the big thing, which I talk about in the piece where I wrote about it, is build accountability into this. Accountability is like a super drug. I mean, if you could bottle accountability into a pill, it would be the most expensive and incredible drug in the world. You can build accountability in the simplest way. I mean, it could be that you and I have a little text that we just have set up where the only thing that goes to that text is you have to say done at the end of your day, whatever your 30 minutes was. So say you're going to be doing some business pursuit that you're building and say, I'm going to be trying to learn Korean. At the end of my 30 minutes, I text saying done. At the end of your 30 minutes, you text saying done, and that's it. But we know that we're letting the other person down we're letting ourselves down, obviously, but we're not committed. We're letting ourselves down if I don't send a text to that thread on that day. That tiny bit of accountability is enough peer pressure to get you to do the thing on the day when it sucks, or on the Saturday where you're hungover, or on the Sunday where, hey, it's Sunday, I don't really want to do it today. It's enough to just get you to do it. And that really, really goes a long way.
I think I'm going to butcher the quote, but I remember Alex Hormozy saying this, which is, so much of succeeding at something is just not quitting. Like just creating the system, the environment so that you don't quit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what comes to my mind when you talk about accountability. I think a lot of the times, and even sometimes I'm like this, I kind of skip over the accountability piece in the beginning. I'm like, I'm just going to get started. I don't even think about accountability. But to your point, the value of accountability is helping you not quit.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep going at the thing.
Yeah, I mean, most people quit the first time it gets hard. The rest of the people quit the second time it gets hard. So if you can just get through those first 2 times, you're already in rare air. Beyond that, I mean, life really gets pretty easy if you just don't quit the first 2 times it gets hard. Life gets a whole lot easier at anything that you want to do. I mean, it literally can be anything. You think about like trying to run races, or you trying to, build your body, or trying to build your business, or whatever it is. And you think about all the people that have been around you, the people who have tried those pursuits, and how many of them quit at the first sign of it getting really hard. I ran my first marathon last year, and I did not know what I was doing. I had just started running. I had started like 6 months before, and I had no real plan around nutrition and no real plan around salt or any of that stuff for the race. And everyone told me, like, don't go out too fast. You're going to hit a wall. You're not going to be able to hit your time. You're going to cramp up, all these different things. And I kept saying to people, like, people would say that to me, and I was like, you don't know me. Like, I'm different. Like, I'm probably going to have all those things happen, but I'm going to freaking crawl across the finish line if I need to hit my time. And my dad surprised me and came out to the race. So he was at the finish line, and I'm running the race. I'm feeling incredible. I'm crushing it. I'm like on pace I was trying to run a sub 3 hour marathon. I'm on pace to run like 2:52 or 2:53 through 21 miles. And all of a sudden I take a step and I feel my hamstring just shoot into a cramp. And I've never felt a cramp in my leg before. I was a baseball player, so it was never like a thing. And I remember just being like, oh shit, these people were right. Like, I'm not gonna be able to make it I can't move. Like, I was like starting to hobble. And I just remember feeling like, okay, this is the point where most people now would quit. They would like stop, they'd stretch, then they'd miss their time massively. And so I kind of kept like shuffling my feet, just kept moving. And then I got to mile 23 or 24, and then it got my other leg. And so now both legs are cramping up. And I remember thinking like, okay, this is when the rest of the people quit. And if I can just keep moving forward, I was starting to do the math in my head. Like, if I just don't stop, if I can just figure out some way to keep my feet moving forward, I'm still going to be under 3 hours. And I'm still going to get to the finish line where my dad is waiting for me, where I know that he believes in me finishing this thing. And so I did. And it hurt like, I mean, it was horrific, right? Like, I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone. It was awful. But I really just remember thinking that, like, okay, I know why people say that about quitting and about hitting a wall and not hitting your time, but I'm different. I'm just not going to quit at those 2 times. And if I just decide that I'm not going to quit, I might pass out, and then maybe it'll take me out of the game. But like, the pain of a cramp, like, I think I can just continue shuffling my feet and get there. And it's really true for life.
Yeah. I love that positive reframe of like, most people quit the first time it gets hard, and everyone else quits the second time it gets hard. And the reason I say I love it is because if you can just get through those first 2 times, you're in rare air.
Mm-hmm.
So it changes the whole dynamic in your mind. You're looking forward to it now. I can't wait for it to get hard because this is when I prove myself. Here's where I want to go next. You mentioned your dad, and obviously he's someone that believed in you. The Pygmalion effect. There is scientific evidence to prove that the people you surround yourself with determine your outcome. The Pygmalion effect. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so the Pygmalion effect is a behavioral phenomenon that says that high expectations lead to high performance. So if I have high expectations for you, and believe that you're capable of incredible things and I'm a constant force in your life and we're working together and I really believe in you, you're going to rise to the level of those expectations. Similarly, if I have low expectations for you and I don't think you're capable of much and I vocalize that to you, you're going to fall to the level of those expectations. And so what I've said in the quote that you're referencing is that is literally scientific evidence to support the idea that the people you surround yourself with make your life. They determine your outcomes. Your environment, the people, literally create your reality. So what better call to action to choose wisely about the people that you allow into your world, to scrub the people that are holding you back, that are telling you to be realistic, laughing at your ambitions, and to uplift the people who are telling you to think bigger, who are pushing you, who have those high expectations for you and are pairing it with incredibly high support. And that's an important point. It's something I've written about with my father in particular, that he had very high expectations for me, but they were always paired with an incredibly high degree of love and support. And I fundamentally believe now as an adult that the key to strong relationships is that pairing of high expectations and high support. One without the other, high expectations with no support is a recipe for disaster. If I have high expectations for my kid and I'm not supporting them to reach those expectations, that can manifest as a lot of animosity, a lot of resentment. If I have high support but no expectations, what are you going to go do? I'm telling you I love you, but hey, you don't have to do much. Do whatever. Do your thing. That's not how I want to live. I want to be surrounded by and I want to provide to other people a level of expectations that I believe you are capable of absolutely anything, and I'm going to help you go and achieve that with this support. And if you can do that, and if you surround yourself with people that do that for you, imagine what you're capable of.
You know what I think is like one of the biggest problems in our society is that so many people grow up without that person. They don't have the dad that believed in them, but not only believed in them, because to your point, sometimes people can be crushed under the expectations of their parents, the belief with the love. And so I have to ask for that person who they don't have the dad that had that, like they didn't grow up with that, or like their mom wasn't around in the way that that she could be that for them. How does someone who doesn't come from that environment start to identify and find people that can be that for them?
Be that to someone else. You attract what you put out into the world, fundamentally. The energy that you put out into the world is what you attract back into your world. There's this quote that I absolutely love. Don't go chasing butterflies, mend your garden, and the butterflies will come. Mario Quintana. It's that exact message. Mend your garden. Create that energy that you want to receive, and the butterflies will come. Those things will come into your life if you are putting that out into the world. So if I don't have that person in my life, I'm going to be that person to someone else. And trust that as a result, I'm going to start attracting the right type of people to me. I've said this before, that I think that being genuine in your support for other people, genuinely cheering other people's wins, is one of the biggest life hacks. Because when you do that, you start to become a magnet for the highest quality people. Being zero sum is the dumbest thing that you can possibly do in life. Because the people that are attracted to someone who is zero sum are not people you want in your life. They are not people you want to be surrounded by. The people that are attracted to someone who genuinely claps when other people are winning, those are incredible people. Those are people who are going to have high expectations and high support for you. And if you surround yourself with that, what do you think happens? That's the rising tide that lifts all the boats. So I just think that all of life then comes down to, what is the energy that I am going to embody because I want to receive that same thing in return? If I am embodying optimistic, positive sum energy, I'm going to receive that in return from the world around me, from the people around me.
I think it was Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes.
He said, pay attention to the people that don't clap when you win. And so I think it just makes the point, it's so difficult to find people that are genuinely rooting for your success. Because even the people that seem like they're rooting for your success, they're rooting for your success up until a certain point. as soon as you starting to overshadow what they're doing, or now you're the person that's getting the attention and the love, they're now kind of silently hating on you.
Drake said, most people like you better when you're working towards something than when you have it. I always thought that was really good. It's like the harsh truth of success, that most people don't want you to actually succeed. They want you to succeed up to the point where you're infringing on them. And then they want to knock you back down. It's like the crabs in a bucket mentality. And as soon as you experience someone as having that, you want to scrub them out of your life. I think that's like a one strike you're out policy for me, frankly. If I feel or experience that someone has that tinge of envy, jealousy, hate about some success or something that I've experienced, I just don't have time for that. And frankly, if I was that way towards them, I wouldn't want them to have time for me.
What are the signs? Like, what are the signs to you? Because a lot of the time I feel like it's not immediately apparent.
Yeah.
It's not clear. It's not obvious.
I think Robert Greene has this thing that people subtly signal it in their face. So if you tell them about a painful experience or a loss, you'll see that they're like, gonna put on a sad face, but they have this slight smile, like their lips turn up. And then similarly, if you tell them about a win, they're gonna act all happy, but they have this a little bit of like resentment in their face. So look at people's faces. You can tell a lot, and you would be amazed by how astute you are if you really observe someone when you're with them, how present they are, how they interact, and what are they saying when you're not around? I mean, people have talked about this before. Like, the best friends in the world that I have, my dearest friends, will talk shit to my face all day, but say good things behind my back. They'll make fun of me for endless reasons, which all are deserved, but behind my back, they are my truest supporters. Those are the friends you want.
I'm curious, and we don't have to get into like exactly who it was. Is there a moment in your life where it was almost like someone that you didn't expect it from them? You didn't expect the hate or them saying things behind your back from that particular person. Like, what was that experience?
Yeah, betrayal. Yeah. I mean, I've had that. We've all experienced that on several occasions, unfortunately. And it's all at those periods of big change. It's all at those periods where you are doing something that exposes some insecurity in another person. It's the idea that you are not responsible for the way that your pursuits or ambitions make other people feel. I am not responsible for the fact that my pursuit of my vision and dreams in life makes you feel small. That's not my problem. It's just not. I'm sorry. To any people out there that feel that way, it's not my problem if it exposes your insecurity about the fact that you are not going after your dream or vision. I'm happy to support you and be there for you to help you go after your dream and vision. But me pursuing the fullest version of myself and my full potential, the way that makes you feel is not my responsibility. And you see that in a lot of people. That is really what drives that envy and that jealousy, is they feel a degree of insecurity in themselves about not pursuing their own fullest version, their fullest potential. And that manifests as hate. That manifests as laughing at you. That manifests as making fun of you behind your back. This guy's not going to make it. What a joke. He can't do that. He's not going to be able to make it with a podcast. What a joke. Guy's not good on camera. Whatever. A million things, right? That's not about you. That's about them. And so I think that is a freeing realization, because the tendency when you hear people saying those things about you, making fun of you, talking crap about you, is to say like, oh no, I must be making a mistake, or what did I do to them? It ain't about anything you did to them. It's about them exclusively. And you are not responsible for how you pursuing your dreams makes someone else feel.
Yeah, I think I heard Chris Williamson say this. He goes, you're a constant reminder that they didn't pursue their dreams. And that's the painful thing, is that whenever they see you doing your thing and you went for it, constant reminder of what they didn't do. And I think one of the ways I have to follow it up with this is for those people that were meaningful at one point in your life, but you've realized, like, I need to let this person go. Like, I need to let them out of my life. What is that process of letting someone go? And the reason why I ask it is, I don't know, I'll just come up with a name. Alan. I've known him for 20 years. We went to school together. We did everything together. We grew up in the same area. Our families are friends. It's like, I think people get into situations where it's so difficult to let go of that person because of history, because of this history. And so I'm curious for you, like, what is that process of getting comfortable with letting that person go?
I don't think it has to be as formal as everyone thinks. It's the ship of Theseus, right? You're replacing an old piece of wood with a new one. And sometimes it's not even replacing it with a new one. Sometimes it's just removing. One of the most liberating things of getting older, you're younger than me, so I can say I'm old, I'm 33. But one of the pieces of wisdom that I would say I have acquired is the idea that I just need less. I don't need 1 million friends anymore. I don't even need 100 friends. I probably honestly don't even need 10 friends. If I have a few of my dearest people, the people that I'm in the boat with, the people that I'm in the trenches with, that's all I really need. And I don't need to go to the other people and say, like, hey, you're no longer on my boat. Sorry. We're no longer in this together. But your attention and your energy is focused. I'm not responding to every single text that I get. I have probably 200 unread text messages. That's not because I don't like these people. I just don't have enough energy anymore. I have a kid who is my number one priority in the entire world. I have a wife who is my second or 1A priority in the world alongside my son. I have my purpose of trying to create an impact in the world. I have a few core family members and I have a few core friends who mean the world to me. And then I have my health and I really want to focus on that. I don't have room for all that much else. I can't keep up with every single friend out there. Does that mean I'm going to just stop seeing them entirely? Probably not. If we get together for reunions or do one thing a year with that group, I am all for that. But I can't respond to every single text message anymore. I'm not that same guy. I can't do the fantasy football league where we're talking smack every single night on the thing. I might pop in, once a month and say one thing, but I just genuinely need to focus and concentrate my energy over time. The way I think about life is that early on, you have this enormous open funnel or open aperture. And over time, what you should be doing is narrowing that focus on the things that now you have learned truly matter to you, the things that are going to be lasting, the things that have meaning to you. And that is good. That's a healthy thing. And so that means removal, focus, less, but better. And again, you don't need to say that to the person. You can communicate it through your actions, through your energy, through your attention, through how responsive you are to things. It's not about being a jerk. It's not about, not being there to support the person if they need you. If some of those people need me and there's something that comes up and they need support for whatever reason, I will be there for those people that were there in my life if they need me to be there. But the random one-off BSing that we used to do when we were younger, I can't keep doing it just because we used to do it.
You know what? This is what came to my mind when you say that. Sometimes it's not about cutting people off. It's about creating distance. So when you're like taking longer, you're not responding to every text message. It's not that you're cutting them off. You're creating distance.
Yeah, it's boundaries, right? It's you can mute and block people in real life. And it's called boundaries. You're creating boundaries. And the people that get most upset about the boundaries you create are the people who you are creating those boundaries for. Those are the people that are going to get upset about it, are the people that are on the outside of those boundaries. But that's the point. That's why you need them in your life.
Yeah. Okay. There are 3 types of people in your life: leaves, branches, and roots. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, this is from Tyler Perry. I think he's like his Medea alter ego, like his, his great aunt or something, like the wise Medea alter ego. Yeah, I mean, this idea is you have three types of relationships: leaves, branches, and roots. Leaves are seasonal. They're the people that are there when it's spring and summer, nice, bright, things are good. But the second there is a gust of wind or the second the weather gets cold, they will fall off the tree. Branches are slightly more stable. They're the people that are there sometimes across seasons, across the winter, into the spring, into the summer. But you need to take great care with leaning too much on them because sometimes they will break and they'll fall. So you can't put too much weight on them. You can't rely on them at all times. And then roots. Roots are the people that are there for you throughout. They're deep in the ground. They're entrenched. They'll be there throughout your entire life. They'll weather the seasons. They'll weather the windstorms, the weather, all of these things. And those are the people that you really can rely on and the people that you need to be the roots for in your life. Understanding the difference between those three and understanding who your roots are is a fundamental and critically important thing for you to live a healthy, happy existence.
You know what? I saw you write about this. We're going through a loneliness epidemic. And I think especially, I can speak to this, especially like in the major cities in the US, I think it's even more pronounced. These big cities where it feels like everyone should be super connected and they're so dense, like a New York or LA, Chicago, like whatever it is, I actually think it's even more heightened, the amount of loneliness. I want to read out some statistics. 15% of men say they have no close friends. That is up 5x from 2 decades ago. 60% of people said they do not feel very connected to others. When I hear stats like that, what I really hear is that people have a lot of leaves and branches in their life, not many roots. And so I'm curious, like you even mentioned, you're like, I don't even need that many roots. If I had like 5 roots, that's an amazing life. And so I'm curious, how does someone go from having a lot of leaves and branches? It's not really fulfilling to them. It's not really giving them that support that they need in their life. How do they develop a few roots in their life?
The first thing is sometimes roots aren't the sexiest relationships. Roots are in the ground, right? They're dirty. They're not very pretty. The leaves are pretty. And that's where the metaphor, I think, even extends to you need to recognize and think about who your roots are today. Because sometimes they're not the ones that are like the flashy, fun, carefree relationships. They might be the gritty ones, but they're the ones that are grounded in this shared vulnerability that builds that strength. I think one of the most fundamental challenges alongside the loneliness epidemic and the things that you talked about, the statistics you cited, is people struggle with vulnerability, especially men. The idea of 2 men being vulnerable with one another, with embracing that they're not feeling okay, that they're feeling lonely, that they're feeling sad, that they're feeling lost, that's a foreign concept to a lot of guys because it runs counter to this traditional definition of masculinity, which is like, I'm tough, I'm a tough guy. I think about the number of friends I had in my locker rooms over the years who were clearly struggling with devastating bouts of depression, and they just couldn't talk about it because you were a guy, you were in a locker room. We're not depressed. Like, quit being a bitch. That was literally the mentality, and how unhealthy that is, and how not conducive that is to building those root relationships, because those roots are built through shared struggle. We know this. The science shows that shared struggle builds bonds. Shared struggle releases oxytocin in your brain, which creates feelings of love and connection. So shared struggle, shared vulnerability is literally what creates those roots in your world. It's the reason why people who go through devastating trauma come closer together. People who go through war together come together because that shared struggle is what builds those roots, builds that depth of connection. So if you're looking to build roots in your life, think about how you can open up in that way, how you can be vulnerable with others who will be vulnerable with you, how you can go and embrace whatever shared struggle you are currently on together. It's a powerful thing.
You know what's interesting? So a couple of weeks ago, we get this entrepreneur. Her name is Tiffany Aliche. She goes by the Budgetista on Instagram. She has a New York Times bestselling book. She has a business that's grossed over $50 million, incredibly successful. There's this point in her story where she is literally sitting at her parents' house. She's 30 years old and she's depressed. And she says the reason why was because she felt all of this shame about being 30 years old, living with her parents, and she couldn't share it. And I remember she's sitting exactly in that couch and she goes, shame succeeds in silence. And it reminds me of what you were saying with the sports teams, right? Which is these men, for the most part, I feel like we typically go through it, is you have these feelings of depression or anxiety. Things are not going well or how you want it to, but it's dead silence. Shame succeeds in silence. And so I'm curious to get your perspective on this, because you're someone that came up as an athlete who now has a large following. There's a number of reasons of why, like, you wouldn't show any vulnerability. It's like, nah, like this is perfect what I got going on. And so what has been that journey of being able to be more vulnerable? Because I think you're right. So many men struggle with that, of like just opening up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would even add to that negative emotions, when bottled up, it's like a volcano bubbling under the surface. It's going to burst through in some bad ways. I mean, I really think of my own life as like a dam that's just being flooded, and it's holding back water, but little cracks are starting to form and the water's starting to shoot through, and you just know that if it goes for too long, the whole thing is going to burst. I mean, some of the most challenging moments of my entire life and journey, most stressful. I mean, if you had looked at my face, 30 pounds heavier than I am today, acne, you could see it in my face that something wasn't right, that I was bottling something up within me. And that's really, that is only solved through the willingness to talk to someone. It doesn't have to be a therapist. It doesn't have to be a professional. It could be a friend. It could be your partner. It could be your spouse. It could be anyone. But I remember when I was thinking of leaving my old firm, I was originally thinking I was going to go join just another investing firm and on the East Coast to be closer to family. And I was interviewing at these different places. I really wanted this one job at this one firm, and I got into the final round. I'd been interviewing for 6 weeks. I really thought I was going to get it. They called me and said no. It was the only thing that I had. And I felt about as dark as you can possibly feel in that moment. I kind of thought, well, I made a terrible mistake. I told my firm I was leaving. I have no plan. Don't know what the future looks like. I just got rejected. I'm getting rejected left and right for all this stuff. And my inclination as a husband and as a man is to bottle that up. That's my bias. Hey, this doesn't involve my role as the provider. So this doesn't need to be something that I stress my wife out with. I'm just going to hold this. And she could tell. And she asked me, and I didn't say anything. And she asked me again, and she kind of peeled it, and it all flowed out. And that conversation that we had on the back of that was the conversation that started the rest of my life. It was the conversation that led to me pursuing this path, the things that I really found energy in. It was the conversation that led to us picking up and moving to be closer to my family. It was the conversation that ultimately led to us being able to conceive and to reducing that stress load and burden that I was holding within me, that I personally think was the reason we were struggling to conceive at the time. That one conversation of her being willing to chip away a little bit until the dam burst and it all came out was fundamentally where everything turned.
Why do you think it has such a large impact of just letting someone, it's like you're kind of holding space. Like, instead of you just keeping this thing to yourself, you're giving it an opportunity just to be there. Why do you think that a conversation like that could have such an impact? Like, why is it that even when you speak about it, it's like you can look back at your history of your life and be like, everything changed with that moment. Why is it so impactful?
Rumi, the poet, Persian poet, says the wound is where the light enters you. That is only true if you allow the light to enter that wound. The light cannot enter the wound if it's closed off and you're hiding it. If you put a Band-Aid over it, no one can see it. The light cannot enter. I love that metaphor because I think that saying it, putting it out, is what allows the light to enter that wound that you've experienced. We all have a wound that we are bottling up, that we're hiding, that we put a Band-Aid over so that no one can see it. And all that we're doing when we do that is not allowing the light to enter. The light is where the change happens. The light is where the new energy flows. The light is where you experience that rebirth on the back end of it. But it only happens if you're willing to pull that off, open it up to the world, and allow that light to enter.
You know what? I think, and it goes back to the discussion we were having about the value of having roots in your life, the danger of even like the loneliness epidemic and people not having close friends. Or like a real support system around them. And so the next thing I wanted to bring up that you wrote about, you spoke about growing in love versus falling in love. The person you choose to partner with in life is the single most important decision you will ever make. The most important piece of advice that I would share is focus more on growing in love than falling in love. Can you talk about that?
Falling in love is easy. Growing in love is very, very hard. Falling in love is what you see on social media. That's the beautiful Instagram vacations, the Nobu date nights, the perfect manicured pictures, the honeymoon, all of that. Growing in love is the struggle. Growing in love is the hard conversations. Growing in love is the pain. And the growing is where that depth of connection and that love is truly built. It comes back to that shared struggle. It comes back to that idea that true bonds are built through that pain, through that shared struggle that you experience. But that can only happen if you embrace growing as the key metric of success. Falling in love is not the metric of success. Anyone can fall in love. Very few people can grow in love. Very few people value those hard conversations, place them, hold them up as an important part, as a critical part of building that depth of connection, building that relationship with somebody. So it's the people that focus on that growing, that understand that life is not the falling. Life is not the perfect Instagram vacations. Most of life is sitting on the couch doing absolutely nothing with the person. When you find someone that you're willing to sit and do absolutely nothing with, and you love sitting and doing absolutely nothing with, that's your person. That's the person that you can grow in love with. And when I say that it's the most important choice you will ever make, I mean it. Because who you choose to partner with in life determines 99% of your happiness or misery in this world. And that can be a romantic partner. It doesn't have to be, but it can and usually is a romantic partner. Because you are going to spend more time with that person than any other person in the world. That is shown in the data. Other than with yourself, this is the person you are going to spend the most time with throughout the course of your life. And so choosing wisely, choosing someone that you can grow in love with, someone that you can partner with to live through life's struggles, not just through the good times. It's easy to live with almost anyone during the good times. I can get along with a lot of people when things are good. But when things are bad, that list starts to shorten.
Yeah. You know what? I don't know this for a fact, but I would feel pretty confident in saying that if you spoke to most single people in the US, their feeling would be that it is nearly impossible to find someone that they can struggle with. Because that's really what you were getting at. Like someone who's not just there for the good moments, the happy times, the good emotions, the fun dates. They're there when times aren't that good, when you're really struggling. The same way that your wife, she could see it in you and she raised it. I would say that most people would think that it's almost impossible to find that person. And so I'm curious for you, because you've been with your wife for what, 7, 8 years,
Since
right?
high school.
Yeah. Okay,
16
so
years.
so way more than that.
Yeah.
You've been married for 7
Yeah.
years.
Yep.
So I'm curious, when you talk to your friends that are like single, they're having a hard time with relationships, they just really struggling to find that person. What do you kind of take away as like, this is probably the biggest reason why people are struggling to find that person that they can struggle with them?
We live in an instant gratification society, and it's the most damning and dangerous part of living in 2024. Is dating and meeting people used to be about having to expose yourself to fear and struggle. You had to go up to somebody. That's scary as hell. You've done that before in your life, I imagine. Most people haven't. Literally had to put yourself, there's nothing more vulnerable and exposing than having to walk up to someone that you find attractive of the opposite sex and strike up a conversation. There is nothing that exposes you more to rejection than doing that. It's so primal and it's so hardwired into your DNA and into your biology. That is so scary. You don't have to do that anymore. You can just on your phone you can be sitting at a bar swiping left and right and only finding the people who have opted in to talking to you. So it's no longer, there's no fear when I walk up to this person because we've both opted in. There's a double opt-in of this whole relationship. And it's all based on looks, by the way. It's entirely based on what the person looks like in the 3 pictures or however many it is nowadays that the person has hand selected and probably edited to portray who they are as a human being in the perfect light. You think they're putting they're not putting bad pictures up of themselves. I wouldn't. So what do you think that does just as a starting point? Just logically, what does that do? I mean, if you think at a macro level, if you're trying to build, I've heard Alex Hormozy actually talk about this. If you're trying to build a human and you want them to be hard during tough times, you're probably not going to put them through a bunch of easy things. I totally agree. If you want to build an athlete, you're not going to just have them sit on the couch. If you want to build someone that's really good at X, Y, or Z, you're probably not going to put them through easy times over and over again. But we've made relationships so easy. We've pulled all of the friction out of the process. All of the things that created fear, all of the struggles has been sucked out slowly in order to make great businesses. These dating apps are great businesses, right? And because dating is scary, people will easily pay money to avoid the fear of it. I don't fault anyone for doing those things. I totally get it. I would do the same thing. But we cannot ignore the impact that has on the very nature of those relationships and on what it does. Yeah. I think about it most for my son when he's getting older. I mean, what world are the kids born today going to live in? If you extrapolate AI, you extrapolate all of these things forward 15, 20 years, are we going to have a normal relationship? How do you have a conversation with someone when you can just have the perfect partner in your phone or in a hologram for a robot? I mean, it's terrifying to me to think about. A perfect partner who meets you exactly where you need them to be and says all the right things at all the right times. That's not life to me. That's terrifying. That's dystopia.
I'm curious, what advice would you have for your son? He comes to you, I don't know how old he is, 25, comes to you and says, I want what you and mom had. How would I get that?
Today? If he was 25 today? I would say, tactically, I would tell him to go to places that self-select for the type of values that he has and that he wants to find in others. If you're into health and you're into wellness, spend time at a farmer's market. If you love your dog, spend time at outdoor dog parks. Go find the places where people have shared values. And then the other piece of advice that I always give to people is probably the best dating advice I would have for anyone to find a partner that you can really connect with. Sit down and make a list of all of the values that you want to find in someone else. Then go out and actually embody that list yourself. That's it. Because so many people sit down and create these elaborate lists of all the things they want to find in a partner, all the things they want to find in the perfect other person, and they don't embody a single damn one of them. How can you expect to find the things in the world if you're not embodying them in the way that you act, in the way that you show up for others?
It's that quote you mentioned earlier, right? Don't waste your time chasing butterflies. Mend your garden and the butterflies will come.
It's the perfect quote.
You know what? Here's where I want to end. The law of reversed effort. This idea changed my life and it may change yours. The law of reversed effort. Can you explain what that is?
Yes. So the best example of this is Carl Lewis, I think 9 gold medals in the Olympics, elite sprinter, track and field athlete, who had this idea that he called the 85% rule. And it was that by running with 85% effort, he actually ran faster than if he ran with 100% effort. And what he meant was that when you strain and push and grind, you actually slow yourself down. When you work harder, you actually have less success. So sometimes the key to success is actually slowing down. The key to going fast is actually slowing down. And it's a reminder for all of us that's a really important one, that in a world that constantly wants you to move faster and faster, to grind more and more, to do more and more, sometimes what's holding you back is the unwillingness to pull back on the brakes a little bit, to just ease up slightly, to not flap your arms so furiously in the pool, because sometimes when you do that, you actually sink.
You know what? I think one of the, we're kind of taught this all throughout growing up, which is like, the harder you work, the more results you will get. It's like this very just direct correlation, like more hard work, more results, better life. And I love some of in your tweet, some of the examples that you mentioned, because even when I read it at first, I was like, well, what are the examples of me working harder at something and getting less of a result? And you bring up some good ones. You say, it's easy to find examples from your own life when this concept rings true. When you press to try and complete a creative task, you become less creative. When you actively push to try to find the perfect partner, you rarely find that person. When you try to force yourself to fall asleep, you stare at the ceiling awake. And it's true. It's completely true. It's like you're trying harder at the thing. I should be getting more results. But it's actually having the reverse effect.
I mean, that point of balanced effort is the point where the best things happen in life. So you have to distinguish sometimes between working hard on the thing and having that point of balanced effort on the thing. Because working hard, again, is a double-edged sword. If I just really, if I'm trying to work hard on a creative task, you can't hard work a creative task. You can't brute force the Sistine Chapel, right? Like that is not a thing. You can't do that. None of us can really aspire to do something as creative as the Sistine Chapel, but in whatever your creative task is, you can't brute force certain things in life. And actually, I would argue that the most valuable and meaningful things in life, you cannot brute force. Healthy relationships, gym, health success, you can't brute force your way to health success because it requires a rest ethic just as much as a work ethic. You need to understand rest and recovery just as much as you do the actual work. That applies to all of these things that we're trying to build meaning around. You can't grind your way to a healthy relationship with somebody. It's just not a thing.
Yeah, one of the things I had this thought recently, and I started watching videos even about it, which was like the art of letting go, which is this paradox. I realized it. I'm even facing it with the podcast now. It'll be interesting to see if you've had the same thing, which is there's like a paradox of life. So on the one hand, you have to want whatever it is that you want more than anything. You need to be obsessed. You need to no stone. I say this all the time to my team. We leave no stone unturned. We do everything that it takes to get the best possible content. That's on the one side. On the other side, you have to be completely okay with the fact that it might not work. And like, if you're just too attached to the result, it's actually going to hinder your progress. I'm curious if you've kind of experienced that same thing.
It's a beautiful framing of it. I tend to think that the best things in life sort of dance on this razor's edge. Call it a paradox. I think of it as like dancing on this razor's edge where in order to experience the depth of love that we all want to experience, we also have to be okay with the fact that that is going to lead to the darkest depth of sadness that we can possibly imagine. In order to experience the love of a healthy relationship with a partner, you have to be okay with the fact that at some point in life that is going to lead to terrible sadness for one of you when the other person passes. And the message is we have to embrace those razor's edges. We have to embrace that edge in life and understand that we can't have one without the other. These are these fundamental things that just exist, that we have to be able to dance on that razor's edge in order to live that beautiful life that we all want.
Yeah. You know, I think for a lot of people, when they look at some of the things that you've done, the followers, the successful businesses, great wife, beautiful son, they would be like, what's the razor's edge for him? Like everything is like perfect. Like it seems everything is in order. I'm curious for you, like what is the other side? Like even if you had to just give people that insight, like what are the parts that are difficult? Like it feels difficult for you at this point that you're at.
I mean, I have terrible fear of things happening to the people that I love most. Or happening to me and me not getting to be there for those people that I love most. Unfortunately, we've had some health things in the family that I won't talk about specifically, but you know, life is a lot more fragile than you think. Even when you take into account that statement, it's always more fragile than you think. And recognizing that, appreciating that, living with that is one of the hardest things in the world. I mean, my biggest fear in the entire world would be something happening to my son. I can't imagine how parents live through that and continue to go on with life. And yet they do. So I never, ever want to live my life in a way that ignores the fundamental gratitude for the moments when things are sweet and when you don't have that pain. Because you never know when those kind of pains, when those catastrophic things to someone you love, to your business, to your purpose, to your health, you never know when those things enter. And after they happen, you'll wish you could just go back to that day before. So embracing that day before mentality in your mind and not living your life in a constant state of fear, but recognizing that things are pretty damn good in the moment. There's so much joy that comes with that.
No, that's special. And you know what's interesting is like we started off this conversation almost like talking about the topic of regret, of reaching this point in life where maybe it's like the job that's good, the relationship that's good, the friends that are good. And it's this difficulty with letting that go so that you can kind of reach what's that next level? Like what's the boundaries of your potential? And it's interesting. So I was reading something this morning. The author, her name is Bronnie Ware. And she was basically a nurse that would take care of like terminally ill patients. She did it for years. And at the same time that she was doing it, she would write down some of the stories and the thoughts that they had about death. And so she writes this book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And the first regret that she mentions, she says, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And I just feel like it's perfect because we kind of face those decisions in life of like, am I going to live the life that is for me, for the people that I care about? or am I going to live a life for others? So,
The word courage is the, I think, most beautifully selected word in that. I've read that book as well, because it does take courage. And recognizing that good can be the greatest enemy in that journey to living the life you want is very hard. And it requires courage to give up good in the pursuit of great.
I love that as a point to end. Sahil Bloom, thank you very much, my man.
Thank you. This was fantastic.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. It's really a dream for me that I get to do this. It's surreal that this is what I do full time and every week. So if you enjoy the content, if you enjoyed the conversation, the stories, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us immeasurably with growing the channel, with getting guests, all of those things. So please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.